In gold mining, disaster rarely announces itself. It arrives in the middle of noise, motion, and routine when engines are already running, when crews are already committed, when turning back is no longer a real option. 1 second, the work is moving forward like it always does. Dirt hauling, machinery grinding, men chasing another ounce, another day, another chance. And then, in an instant, something gives way. Steel fails, momentum dies, and the entire operation feels the shock. This episode begins with that kind of moment, the kind that sends silence through a place usually filled with mechanical thunder. A snapped suspension is more than a broken part. Out here, one failure can ripple through an entire claim, threatening schedules, budgets, morale, and the fragile confidence holding the season together. In the gold fields, machines are not just tools. They are lifelines. When one goes down, everything around it begins to tremble, and that's what makes this story hit harder than a typical setback. Because this isn't just about fixing equipment, it's about what happens when pressure tightens, time disappears, and the men chasing fortune are forced to confront a brutal question: how much more can they absorb before the whole season starts slipping through their hands? In a world where the ground is unforgiving and every day has a price, this breakdown doesn't just raise concerns. It raises the stakes. By the time this episode unfolds, the crews are already deep in the kind of season that tests more than skill. They've been worn down by long hours, mechanical strain, and the constant uncertainty that comes with mining ground that never gives anything away for free. Every ounce of gold recovered has been earned through fuel, grit, calculation, and risk. Nothing here comes easy. And that's exactly why every setback feels so dangerous. There's a rhythm to these operations, and when it works, it can almost look controlled. Trucks move in sequence. Wash plants devour pay dirt. Excavators carve away at the earth with the kind of precision that only comes from repetition and exhaustion. But beneath that rhythm is something more fragile than it appears. A mining season is a balancing act built on timing, reliability, and thin margins. The machinery has to hold, the weather has to cooperate, the ground has to pay, and the crew has to keep believing that the next cut, the next cleanup, the next push might finally justify everything they've poured into the season. That belief is what keeps them moving. Because gold mining is never just a business. It becomes personal. It carries the weight of legacy, pride, debt, rivalry, and survival. For some, it's about proving they belong. For others, it's about making sure a season of sacrifice doesn't end in failure. So, when the episode opens, the tension already exists long before anything breaks. The pressure is already in the air, hanging over every decision like a storm that hasn't yet arrived. And then it does. The suspension snaps. And just like that, the operation is no longer fighting the ground alone. Now it's fighting time itself. What makes a failure like this so devastating isn't only the damage, it's the chain reaction. A broken machine means halted movement. Halted movement means interrupted feeding. Interrupted feeding means lost production. And in mining, lost production is never abstract. It has a dollar amount. It has a gold count. It has faces attached to it. Every idle hour bleeds into the next, and every delay deepens the pressure. The crew doesn't have the luxury of panic, but that doesn't mean panic isn't there. You can feel it in the way people move faster, talk sharper, look harder at the damage as if staring long enough might make the reality change. Because everyone understands what this kind of setback means. Repairs cost money, replacement takes time, improvisation carries risk, and none of those things stop the season clock from ticking forward. There's a brutal truth in operations like this. The breakdown is only the beginning. Once the machine fails, everything else begins to wobble. Plans made the night before become useless by morning. Material that should be moving sits still. Targets that once seemed aggressive now feel almost unreachable. Even morale starts to shift. Confidence turns cautious. Frustration simmers just below the surface. Nobody has to say it out loud for everyone to know this is the kind of problem that can unravel far more than equipment. And yet, This is also where the emotional center of the episode starts to deepen, because breakdowns expose more than mechanical weakness. They expose the emotional cost of the work, the fatigue people have been carrying, the strain leadership has been hiding, the tension between hope and reality. In calmer moments, mining can be framed as ambition, strategy, and determination. But in moments like this, it becomes something raw, more human, more honest. Now the question is no longer how much gold they can pull from the ground. It's whether they can recover fast enough to keep the season alive. This is where the episode tightens, where the setback becomes a reckoning. Under pressure, every operation reveals what it's really made of. Not when things are working, not when the sluice is running clean and the ground is paying well, but here, when the plan fractures, when the machine is crippled, when decisions have to be made quickly and with consequences attached to every option. This is the moment that separates routine from resilience. The crew is forced into a familiar but punishing reality. Adapt now, or lose more than time. Repairs become urgent. Conversations become sharper. Leadership is no longer about giving orders, it's about holding people together while uncertainty grows louder. In documentary terms, this is the heartbeat of the episode. Not just the problem itself, but the emotional gravity surrounding it. You can see it in the posture of the crew, in the clipped responses, in the determination that starts to harden as frustration gives way to necessity, because there's no heroic music out here when things go wrong. There's mud, there's pressure, there's cold metal, failing light, and the knowledge that if this doesn't get handled, the consequences won't remain theoretical for long. Gold totals will suffer, costs will rise, momentum so difficult to build, so easy to lose could vanish. And still, they push. That's what gives this turning point its weight. Nobody gets to stop and feel sorry for themselves. Nobody gets to walk away from the problem and come back when it's convenient. They lean into it because that's the only thing left to do. Backup plans are dragged into motion. Repairs are attempted with whatever skill, grit, and stubbornness the moment demands. The operation narrows into a single goal: get moving again. It's in this stretch that the episode earns its emotional intensity, not through spectacle alone, but through endurance, through the stubborn refusal to let one failure define the outcome, through the unmistakable feeling that everyone on site knows just how close this all is to going sideways and works anyway. Then comes the shift, not a perfect victory, not some sweeping reversal that erases the danger, but a moment of movement, a sign that the worst of the paralysis may be breaking, the kind of moment that doesn't bring celebration so much as relief, heavy, cautious relief, because when you've spent hours staring at the possibility of collapse, even partial recovery feels monumental, and that's the turning point, not the repair itself, but the reclaiming of momentum. In mining, momentum is everything. Once it returns, so does belief. By the end of the episode, the broken suspension has become something larger than a mechanical incident. It has become a symbol of the season itself, strained, pressured, one bad break away from slipping apart, and yet somehow still moving forward. That is the strange truth at the heart of gold mining. Success is rarely clean, progress is rarely smooth, and survival often depends less on avoiding failure than on enduring it. What lingers after the dust settles is not just the question of how much gold was lost, or how expensive the repair might be, or how close the operation came to serious trouble. What lingers is the image of a crew tested in real time, forced to absorb the hit, forced to make hard choices under pressure, forced to keep going in a place where the environment offers no sympathy and time offers no mercy. That's why this episode resonates, because beneath the machinery and the numbers, it tells a story viewers instinctively understand, the story of momentum interrupted, of confidence shaken, of people who have invested too much to quit when things get ugly. And in that sense, the snap suspension is only the surface event. The deeper story is about resilience under stress, about what happens when ambition collides with reality and has to fight for its survival. In the end, the gold still matters. It always will. It is the reason the crews are there, the reason the risk exists, The reason every breakdown feels so personal. But by the close of this episode, the gold is no longer the only prize. There is something else being measured now: resolve. The willingness to hold the line when the season threatens to fracture. The ability to keep building forward even after something important breaks beneath you, because out on the claim, fortune is never promised. It can vanish in a bent frame, a failed part, a lost day, a single brutal mistake. And yet the chase continues, louder than doubt, heavier than fear, driven by the same belief that has always defined this world, that somewhere beneath all the pressure, the mud, and the damage, there is still something worth reaching for. And sometimes, the real story of Gold Rush isn't the moment they strike it rich. It's the moment everything nearly falls apart, and they choose to keep digging anyway.